The stars had always seemed peaceful to humanity. For centuries, people looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They built telescopes. They sent probes. They dreamed of meeting other intelligent life. They should have been more careful about what they wished for. High Commander Sithrak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. Through the massive viewing window, he watched the blue and green planets spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Earth, home to 7 billion primitive creatures who called themselves humans. Sithrak had studied them. His intelligence officers had spent months gathering information. The humans were young. They had only left their planet a few times. They fought among themselves constantly. They were weak, divided, and completely unprepared for what was coming. The Velroth Dominion had conquered 63 species across the galaxy. Every single one had surrendered. Some had fought briefly, but all had eventually accepted the truth. The Velroth were stronger. The Velroth were smarter. The Velroth always won. "Send the transmission," Sithrak ordered. His voice was cold and confident. He had done this many times before. His communications officer pressed a sequence of buttons. Across every radio frequency, every television channel, every phone and computer on Earth, the same message appeared. Sithrak's face filled billions of screens. His gray skin and black eyes made children cry. His sharp teeth made adults feel sick with fear. "People of Earth," Sithrak began. "I am High Commander Sithrak of the Velroth Dominion. Your planet is now under our control. You have 72 hours to surrender completely. Give us your world, your resources, and your obedience. In return, we will allow you to live as servants of our great empire." He paused. He enjoyed this part. "If you refuse, we will destroy your cities one by one. We will burn your forests. We will poison your oceans. Every man, woman, and child will suffer. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." The transmission ended. Sithrak smiled. Across the galaxy, the other species watched. The Galactic Council, a group of elder races who had long ago stopped interfering in such matters, observed from their distant stations. They had seen this story before. They knew how it would end. First, the humans would panic. Then their leaders would argue. Finally, they would beg for mercy. They always begged for mercy. But something strange happened. The first 12 hours passed in chaos. Earth's governments screamed at each other. News channels showed terrified crowds. Military forces moved into position around major cities. It was exactly what Sithrak expected. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The television broadcasts went dark. Radio signals disappeared. Satellite communications shut down. Earth became silent. Sithrak frowned. This was unusual. "What is happening down there?" he demanded. His officers checked their equipment. "We are not sure, High Commander. All human communications have ceased. We cannot intercept any signals." "They're hiding," another officer suggested. "Trying to build defenses." Sithrak shook his head. "Against us? Impossible. They have nothing that can hurt our ships." But as the hours passed, his confidence began to fade. His scouts sent disturbing reports. On the surface of Earth, humans were not running. They were not hiding. They were moving with purpose. Massive bunkers that had been sealed for decades were opening. Underground facilities that did not appear on any map were suddenly active. Factories that had been abandoned were now working day and night. "What are they building?" Sithrak asked. No one could answer him. On the Galactic Council station, Elder Morvith watched the same reports. Unlike Sithrak, Morvith had lived for 3,000 years. He had seen many things. He had watched the Velroth conquer world after world. He had always felt sorry for the victims. But something about this situation made him nervous. "These humans," he said to his assistant. "What do we know about their history?" His assistant brought up the files. "They are a young species, only about 300,000 years old. They developed technology quickly. They have fought many wars among themselves." "How many wars?" The assistant checked. "Thousands, Elder. They have been fighting each other since they first learned to pick up sticks." Morvis felt cold. "And the weapons they have used?" "Everything, Elder. Swords, guns, bombs, chemical weapons, nuclear weapons. They have invented every possible way to kill each other. They even created weapons they were too afraid to use." "Too afraid to use?" "Yes. They built machines of war so terrible that they locked them away. They made agreements never to use them again." Morvis stared at the image of Earth on his screen. The planet looked so peaceful from space, so harmless. But if what his assistant said was true, then the Velroth had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened a species that had been practicing war since the beginning of time. 60 hours into the deadline, a Velroth scout ship disappeared. It had been monitoring a remote area of Earth called Antarctica. One moment it was sending normal reports. The next moment it was gone. Sithrak sent 2 more ships to investigate. They disappeared too. "This is impossible," he growled. "Their technology is primitive. They cannot destroy our ships." But deep in his chest, fear was beginning to grow. When the 72 hours ended, Earth finally responded. It was not a message of surrender. It was not a plea for mercy. It was not even words. It was a fleet. Ships appeared from behind Earth's moon. They were massive. They were black. They looked nothing like the primitive spacecraft humans had built before. These ships were built for one purpose, and that purpose was death. 17 dreadnoughts. Each one was armed with weapons that made Velroth technology look like toys. Sithrak's officers screamed warnings. Alarms rang throughout the flagship. The Velroth Armada, which had never known fear, suddenly understood what it felt like to be prey. On the bridge of the lead human ship, Admiral Helena Vance stood in silence. She was 63 years old. She had gray hair and cold eyes. She had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. Behind her, her crew waited for orders. These were not regular soldiers. These were the ones that humanity kept locked away. The ones too dangerous for normal society. The ones that other humans whispered about in fear. Earth had asked for volunteers to defend their home. The response had been overwhelming. Prisons had emptied. Mental institutions had opened their secure wards. Special forces units that did not officially exist had activated. The monsters were awake. Admiral Vance opened a channel to the Velroth flagship. When she spoke, her voice was calm and cold. "You wanted our surrender. Instead, you will get our full attention. I hope you are ready for what comes next." She closed the channel and gave a simple order. "All ships, begin the harvest." The human fleet moved forward, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Velroth had conquered 63 species. They had perfect records of every battle, every tactic, every weapon used against them. Their military database was the most complete in the galaxy. None of it prepared them for what they faced now. Admiral Vance watched the tactical display on her screen. The Velroth Armada was large. 200 warships arranged in a defensive formation. By any normal measure, they should have been unstoppable. But Vance did not measure things normally. "Commander Torres," she said, "tell me about their formation." Commander Miguel Torres studied the enemy ships. He was young, only 35, but his eyes held the weight of terrible experience. Before joining the Black Fleet, he had spent 15 years in places that did not exist on any map, doing things that would never appear in any history book. "Standard defensive pattern, Admiral. They are protecting their flagship at the center. Their weapons are charged. They expect us to attack directly. Then we will not attack directly. Vance pressed a button on her chair. All ships, execute pattern shadow. Let them see what human creativity looks like. Across the Black Fleet, crews moved into action. These ships have been built in secret over decades. They used technologies that human governments had banned. Technologies that were considered too dangerous, too unpredictable, too cruel. The UES Retribution was Vance's flagship. It was not the largest ship in the fleet. It was not the most heavily armed. But it carried something far more dangerous than weapons thought. It carried Sergeant Major Cole Morrison. Morrison stood in the launching bay with his boarding team. 50 soldiers in black armor. Each one had a story that would give normal people nightmares. Each one had been chosen for a very specific reason. They were survivors. Not the kind who waited to be rescued. The kind who did whatever was necessary to live. And they had all agreed to die for Earth. "Listen up," Morrison said. His voice was rough. A scar ran from his forehead to his chin, a gift from a war that officially never happened. "Our target is the enemy flagship. We are going to board it, take control, and show these aliens what happens when they threaten our home." A soldier raised her hand. Sergeant Lisa Park. She had been a prisoner in 5 different countries before the government realized she was more useful on their side. "Rules of engagement, sir?" Morrison smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "There are no rules. We are fighting for our species. Do whatever you need to do. Make them afraid." The Volrath expected the human fleet to attack with weapons. Instead, the human ships did something impossible. They scattered in all directions, moving at speeds that Volrath sensors could not track. High Commander Sithrak screamed orders. "Track them. Fire at will. Destroy them." His officers tried. But the human ships were using some kind of stealth technology. They appeared on sensors for a moment, then vanished. Volrath gunners fired at empty space. Missiles exploded harmlessly against nothing, and while the Volrath fleet was distracted, small objects launched from the human ships. Boarding pods. Dozens of them, flying through the chaos of battle like seeds in the wind. One of those pods carried Morrison and his team. The pod hit the hull of the Eternal Conquest and cut through the metal like a knife, through paper. Within seconds, Morrison and his soldiers were inside the enemy flagship. Volrath guards rushed to stop them. They were tall, strong, well-trained. They had crushed resistance on dozens of worlds. They lasted about 2 minutes. Morrison moved through the corridors like death itself. His blade, an ancient weapon from Earth's history, cut through alien armor with ease. Behind him, his soldiers used a mix of guns, explosives, and hand-to-hand combat that seemed almost random. But it was not random. It was chaos by design. Human military doctrine had evolved over thousands of years of war. Humans had learned that the best way to defeat a superior enemy was to confuse them, to make them afraid, to make them doubt everything they knew. The Volrath were used to enemies who fought in organized formations. They were used to battles that made sense. This made no sense. The humans attacked from unexpected angles. They used wounded soldiers as bait. They sacrificed themselves to take out single targets. A Volrath officer watched his security feed and could not understand what he was seeing. One human soldier had been shot 4 times. Instead of dying, he had used his own blood to blind a Volrath guard, then killed 3 more before finally collapsing. Another human had been captured. When the Volrath tried to question her, she had bitten through her own tongue and spit it in her captor's face. Then she had revealed the explosives hidden inside her armor. The explosion killed everyone in the room. "What are these creatures?" the officer whispered. "They do not fear death. They do not feel pain." "What are they?" The answer was simple, but he would not have understood it. They were humans. And humans had been fighting and dying for longer than the Vareth had existed. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Vance received reports from across the battle. Boarding teams had successfully entered 12 Vareth ships. Enemy communications were in chaos. The Vareth defensive formation was falling apart. "Excellent," she said. "Move to Phase 2. Target their supply ships." Commander Torres hesitated. "Admiral, the supply ships have no weapons. They are not a military threat." Vance turned to look at him. Her eyes were cold. "Commander, those ships carry food and fuel for the Vareth fleet. Without them, the enemy cannot fight. I do not care if they have weapons. I care about winning." Torres nodded slowly. He understood. In human history, many wars had been won not by destroying armies, but by destroying supply lines. It was cruel. It was effective. It was very, very human. The Black Fleet turned its attention to the Vareth supply ships. Within an hour, all of them were burning. High Commander Sithrak watched his empire crumble. His flagship was compromised. His fleet was in chaos. His supplies were destroyed. He had never experienced anything like this. They were supposed to be primitive, he said. They were supposed to surrender. His second in command, a female Vareth named Tyra, stood beside him. "High Commander, we must retreat. We can regroup and return with more ships." "No." Sithrak's voice was hollow. "Look at them. Look at how they fight. More ships will not help. They do not fight like any species we have faced. They fight like monsters." Thera finished thought in the corridors of the flagship. Morrison and his team reached the engine room. It had taken 3 hours of constant fighting. Only 20 of his original 50 soldiers were still alive. Most of them were wounded, but they were winning. Morrison planted explosives on the main power core. He set the timer for 10 minutes. Then he contacted Admiral Vance. "Admiral, the engine room is ours. The ship will lose power in 10 minutes. "Excellent work, Sergeant Major. Get your team to Extraction Point Delta." Morrison looked at his soldiers. They were tired. They were bleeding. But every single one of them was smiling. "Yes, ma'am." Morrison out. He turned to his team. "You heard the Admiral. Time to go home." As they moved through the dying ship, Morrison thought about what they had accomplished. Humanity had faced extinction. Instead of surrender, they had chosen to fight. And the galaxy was learning what human determination really meant. Above Earth, the battle continued. But the outcome was no longer in doubt. The monsters were awake, and they would not stop until their home was safe. Nothing in the universe could make them stop. The security recordings from the Eternal Conquest spread through the Velrith fleet like a disease. Every soldier, every officer, every commander watched in horror as humans tore through their flagship. Captain Veth commanded the battlecruiser Iron Fist. He was a veteran of 23 planetary conquests. He had personally killed over 1,000 enemies in his career. He feared nothing. Until now. On his screen, he watched a human soldier charge directly into a group of Velreth guards. The human was outnumbered 5 to 1. He should have died in seconds. Instead, he killed all 5 guards in under 30 seconds. He used his gun until it was empty, then used it as a club. When the gun broke, he used his bare hands. When his arm was broken, he used his teeth. "This is not possible," Veth whispered. "These creatures should not exist." His communications officer interrupted. "Captain, we are receiving a message from the human fleet." "Put it on screen." Admiral Vance appeared. Behind her, Velrith prisoners knelt in chains. Her face showed no emotion. "Attention, Velrith fleet. Your flagship has fallen. Your supply ships are destroyed. 23 of your warships have been captured. You have two choices. Surrender now, or we will take every single ship by force. Make your decision quickly. We are not patient people." The transmission ended. Veth looked at his crew. Their faces were pale with fear. The Velrith had never experienced this. They had always been the predators. Now, for the first time, they understood what it felt like to be prey. "Captain," his tactical officer said, "should we surrender?" Veth wanted to say yes. Every part of his body screamed at him to give up, to stop fighting, to survive. But surrender meant shame. It meant admitting that the Velrith, the greatest conquerors in the galaxy, had lost to a primitive species. "No," Veth said. "We fight. Launch all fighters. Target the human flagship." Across the fleet, other captains made the same choice. Pride was stronger than fear. Velrith fighters launched by the thousands. They formed massive wings of death, all heading toward the human ships. Admiral Vance watched them come. She felt something close to admiration. The Velrith were brave. Stupid, but brave. All ships, defensive formation. Let them come to us. The human fleet arranged itself in a sphere. Their weapons pointed outward in every direction. They waited. The Velrith fighters attacked in waves. They were fast and deadly. Their pilots were the best in the galaxy. Against any other enemy, they would have won easily. But the human gunners had been trained differently. They did not aim at individual targets. They created walls of fire that no ship could pass through. The Velrith fighters flew into death itself. In the first wave, 800 fighters died in less than a minute. The second wave lost 600. The third wave never launched. The pilots refused. They had seen too much. Their courage had limits. High Commander Sithrak sat in the emergency bridge of his flagship. The main bridge had been destroyed in the boarding action. Half his crew was dead. The other half was barely functional. "Report," he demanded. Thera stood beside him, bloodied but alive. "We have lost 41 ships, High Commander. Another 30 have been boarded. Our fighter wings are refusing to attack. The fleet is falling apart." "How?" Sithrak's voice cracked. "How is this possible? They are insects. They should have been crushed." "They are not insects, High Commander. They are predators. We made a terrible mistake." Sithrak turned to look at her. "What mistake?" "We studied their technology. We counted their ships. We measured their weapons. But we did not study their history. We did not understand what they truly are." She pulled up a file on her tablet. Images appeared. Human history, wars, weapons, atrocities. They have been killing each other for 10,000 years, High Commander. They invented new ways to die. They turned murder into an art form. They built weapons that could destroy their entire planet, and they almost used them against each other. Sithrak stared at the images. He saw trenches filled with bodies. He saw mushroom clouds rising over cities. He saw gas chambers and mass graves and weapons that should not exist. They did this to their own kind? Yes, and they survived. They kept breeding, kept fighting, kept evolving. The weak ones died. The strong ones became stronger. Every generation, they became more efficient at war. Thyra put down her tablet. Her voice was quiet. "We thought we were facing a young species. We were wrong. We were facing 10,000 years of natural selection for violence. We woke something that should have been left sleeping." On the Retribution, Admiral Vance received reports from her boarding teams. The news was good. Ship after ship was falling to human assault squads, but one report caught her attention. It came from Sergeant Major Morrison. His team had found something in the bowels of the Velrith flagship. A prison. Inside were members of species the Velrith had conquered. survivors who had been kept as slaves and specimens. Admiral, Morrison's voice was rough. You need to see this. The image appeared on Vance's screen. Rows of cages. Creatures of all shapes and sizes, starved and broken. Some had been experimented on. Some were missing limbs. All of them had the same look in their eyes. Hopelessness. Vance felt something stir in her chest. It was not sadness. It was rage. Sergeant Major, free them. All of them. Yes, ma'am. And what about the Velrith guards? Vance's voice was ice. Do what you do best. Morrison smiled. With pleasure, Admiral. The liberation of the prison took an hour. Morrison's team moved through the facility with brutal efficiency. Every Velrith guard they found was killed. There was no mercy. There was no hesitation. When it was done, Morrison stood before the freed prisoners. They looked at him with a mixture of fear and wonder. They had never seen a human before. They had never seen anyone fight the Velrith and win. A small creature, something like a child with 4 arms, approached Morrison. His voice was weak. When are you? Morrison knelt down to look at the child. His armor was covered in blood. His face was scarred and hard. But his voice was surprisingly gentle. We are humans. We come from a planet called Earth. Are you going to hurt us? No, little one. We are going to take you home. The child stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, it reached out and touched Morrison's hand. Thank you. Morrison felt something break inside him. For years, he had been a weapon. He had killed without question. He had become something that barely counted as human. But in that moment, holding the hand of a scared child, he remembered why he fought. Not for glory. Not for revenge. Not even for Earth. He fought so that children like this one could be free. You're welcome, kid. Now let's get you somewhere safe. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Sithrak received word that the prison had been liberated. His slaves were gone. His prisoners were free. Everything he had built was collapsing. High Commander, Thyra said, we must make a decision. We can continue fighting and die, or we can surrender and live. Sithrak looked at the tactical display. His fleet was broken. His soldiers were terrified. The humans showed no signs of stopping. He thought about his pride. He thought about his honor. He thought about the 63 species he had conquered. And then he thought about death. Open a channel to the human flagship. The connection was established. Admiral Vance's face appeared on his screen. High Commander Sithrak, she said. Have you made your decision? Sithrak felt the words stick in his throat. He had never surrendered. He had never begged. He was the High Commander of the Velrith Dominion, but he was also alive. And he wanted to stay that way. I ask. He stopped. Started again. I ask for mercy. We surrender. Please, stop. Admiral Vance looked at him for a long moment. Her expression did not change. I will consider your request, High Commander. But first, you need to understand something. She leaned forward. Her eyes were cold as space itself. Mercy is not given. It is earned. And your species has a lot of earning to do. The transmission ended, and Sithrak was left alone with his fear. The monsters had accepted his surrender. But he knew, deep in his heart, that the nightmare was far from over. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the Velrith fleet lowered its weapons. Communications channels across 1,000 worlds carried the news. The unthinkable had happened. The Velrith had surrendered. On the Galactic Council Station, Elder Morvith stared at his screen. His ancient hands trembled. He had lived for 3,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. But he had never seen anything like this. The humans won, his assistant whispered. They actually won. They did more than win, Morvith replied. They showed the entire galaxy what happens when you underestimate a species. Around the council table, representatives from dozens of worlds exchanged nervous glances. They had all been afraid of the Velroth. They had all accepted Velroth dominance as a fact of life. Now, a new power had emerged. And no one knew what humanity would do next. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the Retribution and studied the surrender. Velroth ships floated in space with their weapons powered down. Escape pods launched from damaged vessels. Across the battlefield, the remains of destroyed ships drifted like dead leaves. "The victory is complete, Admiral," Commander Torres reported. "The Velroth fleet has fully surrendered." Vance nodded slowly, but she did not feel victorious. She felt tired, angry, hungry for something more. "Commander, how many freed prisoners did we recover from the Velroth ships?" Torres checked his records. 3,842 individuals. 17 different species. Some have been in captivity for decades. And the dead? We found mass graves in 4 ships. Thousands of bodies. Species that the Velroth decided were not useful as slaves. Vance closed her eyes. She thought about the child that Morrison had saved. She thought about the mass graves. She thought about the 63 species that the Velroth had crushed. "Contact Earth Command," she said. "I need to speak with the Council of Defense." Within an hour, Vance was speaking with the leaders of humanity. They appeared on her screen from bunkers scattered across Earth. Presidents, generals, scientists, and commanders who had guided humanity through its darkest hour. Admiral Vance. General Marcus Webb spoke first. He was the head of Earth's military forces. "Congratulations on your victory. The entire planet is celebrating." "Thank you, General. But I am not calling to celebrate." The leaders exchanged concerned looks. "Explain," Webb said. Vance took a deep breath. "We have defeated the Velroth fleet. But the Velroth Dominion still exists. Their homeworld is untouched. Their infrastructure is intact. If we simply take their surrender and go home, they will rebuild. In 50 years, maybe 100, they will return. And next time, they will be prepared for us." "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" "I am suggesting that we finish what we started. We take the Black Fleet to the Velroth homeworld. We dismantle their military. We free their slaves. We make sure they never threaten anyone again." Silence filled the channel. The leaders of humanity looked at each other, weighing the decision. "That would be an invasion," one leader said. "We would be the aggressors. We would be protectors," Vance replied. "Not just for Earth, but for every species the Velroth have oppressed. If we walk away now, we abandon them to slavery and death." General Webb rubbed his eyes. He was old, tired, and carrying the weight of impossible choices. "Admiral, if we do this, there is no going back. We will not just be defenders. We will be conquerors. No, General, we will be liberators." There is a difference. The debate lasted for 3 hours. Arguments flew back and forth. Some leaders wanted peace. Others wanted revenge. A few simply wanted the nightmare to end. In the end, the decision was made by a single vote. Humanity would not stop at victory. They would ensure the safety of their world and the freedom of the species the Velroth had enslaved. The Black Fleet would go to the Velroth homeworld. Admiral Vance received the news with grim satisfaction. She had hoped for this decision. She had also dreaded it. "Commander Torres," she said, "plot a course for the Velroth homeworld. Inform all ships. We move in 12 hours. Torres hesitated. "Admiral, may I ask you something?" "Go ahead. Do you believe we are doing the right thing?" Vance thought about the question. It was not simple. Nothing about war was ever simple. "I believe we are doing what is necessary," she finally said. The Volrath built their empire on slavery and murder. They gave no mercy to their victims. They came to our home and demanded our submission. If we show them weakness now, we invite future attacks. Not just on Earth, but on every free species in the galaxy. She turned to face her crew. They were watching her, waiting for guidance. We are not heroes, Vance continued. We are soldiers. We do the ugly work so that others can live in peace. The Velrath asked for mercy. Fine, we will show them mercy. But it will be our kind of mercy. The kind that ensures they never hurt anyone again. The crew nodded. They understood. They were not happy about what they had to do, but they would do it anyway. That was what being human meant. Across the galaxy, news of humanity's decision spread. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Elder Morvith addressed the assembly. The humans are not stopping, he said. They are taking their fleet to the Velrath homeworld. Panic erupted. Representatives shouted over each other. Some called for intervention. Others called for isolation. A few suggested joining the humans. Silence. Morvith raised his hand. The chamber quieted. None of you will do anything. We will watch. We will observe. We will learn. Learn what? A representative demanded. We will learn what kind of species humanity truly is. Are they liberators, as they claim? Or are they simply another empire in the making? Their actions at the Velrath homeworld will answer that question. The council agreed to wait and watch. It was all they could do. On the Retribution, Vance prepared her fleet for the journey. She called a meeting of her senior officers, including Sergeant Major Morrison. Morrison looked different now. He had cleaned the blood from his armor. He had bandaged his wounds. But something in his eyes had changed. Sergeant Major, Vance said, you saved over 3,000 prisoners from the Velrath ships. How are they? Recovering, Admiral. Most of them had given up hope. They thought they would die as slaves. When we freed them, some of them cried. Some of them laughed. A few just sat in silence, unable to believe it was real. Vance nodded. That is why we are doing this. Not for revenge. Not for glory. For them. For every prisoner on the Velrath homeworld who's waiting for someone to save them. Morrison met her eyes. I understand, Admiral. My team is ready. Good. Because this next battle will be harder than anything we have faced. The Velrath homeworld will be heavily defended. They will fight to the death to protect their empire. Then we will give them death, Morrison said simply. The meeting ended. The officers returned to their duties. The fleet prepared for departure. In her private quarters, Vance sat alone. She looked at the stars through her window. Somewhere out there, billions of slaves waited for freedom. Billions of Velrath prepared for war. And humanity, the monsters that Earth had unleashed, were coming for them all. She thought about her grandmother, who had survived a terrible war on Earth. Before she died, she had told young Helena a simple truth. Peace is not the absence of war. Peace is what happens when good people are willing to fight for it. Evil does not go away on its own. It has to be destroyed. Vance had spent her life living by those words. Now she would prove them true. Admiral, Torres's voice came through the communicator. The fleet is ready. All ships report prepared for jump. Vance stood. She straightened her uniform. She set her face in the cold, hard mask that her crew knew so well. Initiate jump sequence. Take us to the Velrath homeworld. The Black Fleet vanished into the darkness between stars, carrying with them the full fury of a species that refused to be conquered. The Velrath had asked for mercy. Now they would learn what human mercy truly meant. The Velrath homeworld was called Dominax Prime. It was a massive planet, twice the size of Earth, covered in gray cities and military installations. For 1,000 years, it had been the heart of an empire, the center of power, the place where conquered species were brought to serve and die. Now, the Black Fleet hung in orbit above it, and everything was about to change. Admiral Vance looked down at the planet through the viewing window of the Retribution. From space, it looked almost peaceful. Clouds drifted across gray continents. Lights twinkled in the darkness of the night side, but she knew what waited below. Billions of Velroth warriors, thousands of defense platforms, weapons capable of destroying entire cities. And millions of slaves waiting for someone to save them. Admiral, Commander Torres reported, "The Velroth government is hailing us. They want to negotiate. Put them through." A face appeared on the screen. Supreme Chancellor Korath, the ruler of the entire Velroth Dominion. He was old, ancient by Velroth standards, with deep lines carved into his gray skin. His black eyes showed no fear. "Human Admiral," he said, "you have destroyed our fleet. You have humiliated our species. What more do you want?" Vance studied him. She had read his file. He had ordered the destruction of 3 species. He had approved experiments on living prisoners. He had built his empire on a mountain of bones. "I want justice," she replied. "I want every slave on your planet freed. I want your military disbanded. I want your leaders to stand trial for crimes against life itself." Korath laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. "You are a fool. We will never surrender our homeworld. Every Velroth will fight to the death. You will lose millions of soldiers trying to take this planet. Then millions of your people will die," Vance said calmly. "The choice is yours." The connection ended. Korath had made his position clear. Vance turned to her officers. "Begin the assault. Target military installations only. Civilian areas are off limits until we have no other choice." The Black Fleet moved into attack formation. Weapons charged. Fighters launched. The second battle for humanity's future was about to begin. The defense of Dominax Prime was fierce. The Velroth fought with everything they had. Orbital platforms fired streams of plasma that could melt steel. Ground-based missiles rose by the thousands. Fighter squadrons threw themselves at the human ships in waves of desperation, but the Black Fleet had been built for this. Human engineers had designed every ship to absorb punishment and keep fighting. Human weapons cut through Velroth defenses like fire through paper. Within 3 hours, the orbital defenses were destroyed. Within 6 hours, human landing craft began touching down on the planet's surface. Sergeant Major Morrison led the first assault team. They landed in the capital city, right in the heart of enemy territory. Around them, Velroth soldiers scrambled to respond. "Stay together," Morrison ordered. "Move toward the slave quarters. Free everyone you find. Kill anyone who tries to stop you." His team advanced through the streets. Velroth citizens fled in terror. They had heard the stories. They knew what humans were capable of. Morrison did not enjoy their fear, but he did not feel sorry for them either. These people had built their comfort on the suffering of others. They had watched slaves die in their streets and done nothing. They had celebrated the conquest of peaceful worlds. Now, they would learn what it felt like to be powerless. The assault continued for 3 days. Human forces spread across the planet, liberating slave camps and dismantling military bases. The Velroth army, once the most feared in the galaxy, crumbled like sand. Some Velroth chose to fight to the death. Morrison's team found one commander who had killed all his slaves rather than let them be freed. The man stood in a room full of bodies, a weapon in his hand, screaming about honor and glory. Morrison shot him in the head without a word. Other Velroth surrendered. They dropped their weapons and raised their hands, hoping for mercy. They received it. Human soldiers secured them in camps, where they would wait for trial And everywhere the humans went, they found slaves. Millions of them. Dozens of species. Some had been in captivity for generations. They had never known freedom. They had never known hope. Now they stood in the sunlight for the first time, watching their liberators with wide, wondering eyes. Morrison found himself in a massive underground complex, where the Velroth had kept their most valuable slaves. Scientists, engineers, artists stolen from conquered worlds and forced to work for the Empire. One of them, an ancient being with silver skin and sad eyes, approached Morrison. "You are the humans," the being said. "We heard rumors. We thought they were lies. Stories to give us false hope." "They were not lies," Morrison replied. "You are free now. All of you." The being studied him. "Why did you do this? You did not know us. We are strangers. Why would you risk everything to save us?" Morrison thought about the question. He had killed many people in his life. He had done terrible things. He was not a good man, but even bad men could do good things.